Hi everyone, welcome to Cloud Ranger's Microsoft Azure training. This is the 2018 edition. As you all know, I'm Sean Ismail, a Microsoft Azure MVP. My contact information below, as well as all the assets for this course, is below as well. That includes the slides, website, YouTube channel, and everything else. So today is Module 1, Introduction to Azure's Continuation. We are going to Lesson 5. This is Managing Azure with Azure CLI. So in the previous lesson, we have talked about how we can use PowerShell in Windows as well as in Linux to, use, shell scripts or use commandlets directly from a command line to interface and work with Microsoft Azure. Today, we are going to talk about the CLI. This is actually for folks who want to primarily use Linux. So let's get started. Like I mentioned, in previous lesson, we found out that Azure PowerShell can be used from Linux if we want to, or a Linux platform, similar to, a Mac OS, or if you're using Ubuntu or CentOS, Red Hat, or whatever. But some of you may prefer something more Linux native. So that means if you're scripting, doing a Bash script or something else, you may want something that's a little bit more geared towards the Linux folks in the sense that it interfaces well with the existing tools and scripts that you're using. It's not like you cannot do that with PowerShell, but you know, you may prefer something that's meant for doing this in Linux. And that's where the Azure CLI comes in. Azure CLI, similar to PowerShell, it can be used both on Windows and Linux. That means that if you want to use this CLI on Windows, you can do so as well. This is very similar to PowerShell we saw in the last lesson that primarily people think of PowerShell and Windows, but PowerShell can be used on Linux as well. Similar to CLI, it has support for Windows, and we'll see how to do that. So first, when Azure came up with the CLI concept, it was CLI 1.0. It was based on Node.js, and it was known as XPlat or cross-platform CLI. Um, and the CLI 1.0, it is still supported. If you're using with Azure Classic stuff, you can use the CLI to definitely do that. Um, you can also use that from the ARM model we keep talking about, that Azure Resource Manager. Okay, so CLI 2.0, this is actually based on Python, and it only supports the ARM or the Resource Manager model. You cannot interact with the classic model if you're working with that. And Microsoft, as you can imagine, is trying to get out of that whole classic model and going towards the ARM model. So, CLI 2.0 is something that we'll be focusing on. So how to get CLI 2.0 is pretty simple. I have the link up there for both Linux and Windows. So for the Linux, you'll find there are all the options for various distros. Like if you're using the Ubuntu side or the Red Hat CentOS side, you'll find all of that in there. And Windows is basically like an installer. It's an MSI installer. Then once you install that, you can go to the command prompt and you can start using that. So we are going to go and take a look at both. Okay. So I'm in my portal here, and I just created a test VM as usual to go and check it out. That means when we actually have it installed, I want to run a couple of commands. One thing I wanted to mention, actually, I haven't, is that CLI, similar to PowerShell, is actually open source as well. Okay, so this is the link. You can go over there and check it out. There's some information on how to get started to use the CLI. Okay, this is the CLI 2.0. But this is the link we are more interested in. It's the install Azure CLI 2.0. From here, the MSI I was talking about was a direct link, but you can actually see there's a link over here to install on Windows, Mac OS, or you can use whatever apt, zipper, or whatever you want to use on the Linux side, and you can do that manually as well. So if you're using Debian or Ubuntu, you just click on this link. So let's start with the Windows one first, okay? Because this will be a simple one. As you can see, you get to a download the MSI installer. That's the link I had. You start installing it. It's about 38 megs, not a whole lot to actually get started with this, and it will provide the full feature that you see on the Linux side as well. So there is a feature parity there. Everything is supported on the Windows side versus the Linux side as well. So we'll just give it a couple of seconds to get downloaded. All right, now the download is completed. Let's go ahead and click on that. It's basically just going and running the installer. It's very simple to do this. So what we are doing here, as you know, is we are installing CLI 2.0 on the Windows. I'm actually running Windows 10, as some of you know, and that's what we're going to do. It's just computing right now, looking at some space requirements. Okay, that it was doing that for almost like 30 seconds or so. I paused. Okay, we'll come and accept the terms in the license agreement and click on install. It's a very simple installer. It's going to go and get this installed. So I'm going to pause here for this installer to complete, and I'll come back once it's done. All right, it took about good 2 or 3 minutes to finish it. Okay, so we have installed the CLI 2.0 for Microsoft Azure. Let's click on finish. The way you run this on Windows is you go to the command prompt and you should be able to start this off right from there. The command that you should be using to check this is AZ or AZ, depending on where you are and how you pronounce that. Once you once you put in that command and press enter, it should actually show you the whole help and the Azure thing. So I've noticed that it takes a little bit of time to actually think and get all this information, even when I run a command. But technically, as soon as you run this and Azure shows up, means the installation was done properly. So similar to uh, we talked about in PowerShell, you now need to connect to your subscription, your account, and then connect to your subscription to actually see anything important. Like I mentioned here, that I do have a virtual machine that's there on my subscription. Um, I'm going to run a command to actually go and see how many virtual machines I have. So in the commandlets, I actually have the commands for this. Um, this is what you need: log into Azure from CLI 2.0. So we are going to use the command az login, and we are going to go check some information as well as look at the virtual machines. These commandlets will be there for you on GitHub, so check it out from there. So the first thing we need to do is log into Azure from CLI 2.0, and it's as simple as az login. And similar to PowerShell, it will give you a link for you to go put in your browser and put in a code. We'll just wait for that to pop up here. Let me actually minimize this a little bit. So it's going and trying to hit Azure to get that information. Like I mentioned, it takes a little while for this information to come back in this CLI 2.0. But anyways, similar to PowerShell, we're going to take this, put it in the browser, and take it from there. Let's see. Now it's asking for the code. We're going to take this code. This is very similar to PowerShell, if you recall, in my last lesson. It's saying it's Azure Cloud cross-platform command line. You go put in your account information. You have signed in. I already have signed in, so as you can see, the browser took that credential and put there. You may be prompted to put in your, username and password there. But once that is done, as you can see, it went and connected and provided me all the information about my subscription. So that's my tenant ID. I can actually look at that, but more importantly, I can see that this is my subscription ID. This is actually a JSON format. It by default in CLI 2.0, all the responses you get are in um, JSON format. That's the output it always sends. It's very important at this point that you go and you make sure that you are connected to the right subscription ID and the right subscription name, because if you have a lot of subscriptions that or a lot of accounts you connect to for your day-to-day work, you want to make sure that you are not inadvertently, connecting to a wrong subscription and doing your test work. Okay. Uh, so the next command we are going to actually try. So if we clear all of this, is if you actually want to go and keep check which subscription you're to, you can go and do AZ account list. So this will be very similar to the previous output that we saw automatically. It shows up once you connect to the subscription from the browser. So we'll wait for that information. And as you can see, it took a little time over there, but it showed up with the same information. It's very important one. Anytime I'm actually deleting anything or running a large script that is doing a lot of stuff, I run this command to always make sure I'm connected to the right one. So now that we are connected to the right subscription, I should be able to run a command and get all my virtual machines. So I have an easy command over here, get all the VMs. Is it VM list? It's pretty simple. And you'll notice, for some reason for CLI 2.0, I noticed that, the response takes a little bit of time to come back. I guess it gets all the information, it makes that query, puts it in JSON format, maybe because of that. Let me know if you guys see similar behavior. Anyways, so the response showed up over here. As you can see, this is JSON format, JSON, right? It's like XML. If you are not familiar with it, and I'm grossly oversimplifying saying it's like XML. But as you can see, it's showing me my VM size. It's getting all that information for that virtual machine actually. Uh, my username, computer name, my test VM. So this is all that information that's coming out. Now, some of you might not really be super comfortable with this format of things that's coming back. That's why any command that you run in here, you can actually put that output to a table, and it actually makes it a little bit more simpler to read. So all I'll do is change the output to a table. It will not provide as much information, but it will actually come back in a much cleaner format for you to look at this stuff. I like the JSON format because it obviously goes and gets all that information that I need. So sometimes it's more helpful to get all that information. But then sometimes it's very helpful to get a very simple formatted output to show how it is, right? So you can see my test VM was the virtual machine located in East US, and it's also giving the resource group name. You can obviously have more properties show up without table, but we'll do that in a different lesson. If you recall the subscription info, let's actually try that, right? We know that this one was sending a JSON. Um, it was sending this one, right? So let's see what happens when we actually output this one in a proper format in a table. I'm assuming it will be a lot cleaner. All right. So you can see that it's coming and telling me the name and the cloud name, the subscription ID. It's much more cleaner to read. You'll get quite fond of this output to a table. Okay. So now that we did this, and by the way, this is all on Windows, right? How do you now do this on Linux? How do you install CLI on Linux and take it from there? So I'm not going to use a Linux shell like I mentioned in my previous thing that in Windows 10 we actually get a bash shell which gives you everything that you need in a user space. If you are going to do this on a Linux box, I'm going to actually use bash shell on Ubuntu. So all the commands that I have are good for Ubuntu here. And if you go back to the previous um, the link I had earlier. From here, you can see if you're on CentOS or Red Hat, this is the package management or zipper, or whatever. You can even do this in Docker, right? So I'm going to use apt or apt to go and do this. Um, and you can definitely try from your shell, okay? Depending on which shell, go pick the one. My Windows 10 came with the bash shell, so that's what I'm going to do. So in the commands section, I actually went and this is very similar to what I have here, but I'm going to follow this because most of you will probably follow from here. So the first thing you need to do is obviously get the repo for Microsoft repo added to your repo list. And as you can see, it's taking the latest release and it's adding this packages, Microsoft packages to that repo. So let's go ahead and copy and paste that. It's asking for my sudo password. So it's added already. And after that, we are going to go and put the keys in there for Microsoft right here. While that happens, I'm going to also do the transport to HTTPS. Let that actually come back. As you can see, this is very, very simple to do, right? You're just basically installing the Azure CLI package and you should be good to go. So I'm installing the transport to use HTTPS there and go install the Azure CLI. Shouldn't take too long. I already ran the apt update earlier, so it's just going and grabbing all the Microsoft packages really, and we should be done momentarily. It's about 39 or about 40 megs. As you can see, it's downloading that right now. I'm going to pause and come back once this is done. So it's been already a couple of minutes. I'm still waiting here. It may seem like it's hanging, but it's not. It's actually doing work in the back end. So, once it's back to the prompt or to the command line, I will unpause and come back. I just want to let you guys know that it's actually doing something there. It's just not sitting there. All right. I think it took about good 5-10 minutes for me for this thing to get fully installed. And while it was happening, it wasn't really talking about anything. As you can see, it was unpacking this for the longest while and it just setting up Azure CLI and it's done. Anyways, it's done right now means we have to do the same thing we did earlier. So as simple as AZ, and we are going to find out if it has been installed properly. As you can see, it has. We are getting that output. We are going to do similar stuff, AZ login, and this is going to throw us the browser. Um, it's going to throw us the browser URL and go put in that code. So let's go ahead and do that. Try it out of here, paste and go. Let's get the code. Put in that code. Continue. All right, if I come back here, it should show our subscription info. That means it's connected. There you go. And here we are. So let's try the same commands we used when we were doing this on the Windows stuff. I'm going to output this to a table. All right, and let's try our AZVM list. Let's output this. Actually, I'm not going to output this one. All right, now I'm going to do the table. See how it looks. I don't know if you're noticing this. When I was doing this on the Windows, right, the response time was a little bit longer. Now that I'm on Linux, obviously it's coming a little bit faster. Yeah. All right. So I think that was it. So what I'm now going to show you is similar to PowerShell, the easiest way to do this. So once you are in the portal, let's go back to the dashboard here. Um, if you remember, on the top bar over here, there was the Cloud Shell. So I've actually reset my Cloud Shell completely. If you have been following the previous Cloud Shell, you can actually go toggle between CLI 2.0 and Bash Shell, right? So if you remember my last lesson, I went to PowerShell for Windows. I'm actually going to go Bash Linux. So I'm going to go click on that. Since I went ahead and deleted my resource group and cleaned it up for this lesson, I have to go create all the storage and everything else. But if you already had that created as part of the PowerShell lesson, this should be much, much shorter. It will go and just get your bash shell right over here. It's going to be very similar how we went and got the PowerShell. It was already connected. This one, it's going to have the bash shell with the Azure CLI 2.0 connected. So I'm going to pause the video and come back once everything is created and we are back at the prompt. Actually, you know what? As you can see, it already started. It went and created a resource group, same like last time. It's initializing the account and the Cloud Shell. It's requesting a Cloud Shell and it has succeeded. And this was the toggle I was talking about, by the way. You can see you can toggle between the PowerShell and the Bash shell. Means you are doing PowerShell here and CLI here, right? So you can do that together. So as usual, look at this. It's already at a prompt. And if I go, you don't need to install or do anything. If you just do AZ over here, you can see it already showed up. I don't have to log in, but I can run that command to actually find out um, AZ account list to actually see the subscription I'm connected to. Um, AZ VM list over here, and we are going to output this to a table. It's much snappier. See, it's actually getting all this information right away because it's all connected. We didn't, like as usual, on the Cloud Shell, we didn't have to install CLI 2.0. We didn't have to explicitly connect. And the reason behind that is because you are already in the subscription, right? So it's all already there. And it's as simple as this, going over there and clicking on this. It looks for the bash shell. So the next time you go do this, it should be very, very simple. Okay. I think this is it. That's all that information I had for today. Um, on the slides, I actually have, uh, after this, I actually have all the commandlets and everything that I put in there for you. But I think that this is it. So I think in module one, now we have seen how to do this. I mean, how to do Azure stuff or connect to Azure services and interact with them from Portal. We have seen that from PowerShell, and we have now seen that from CLI 2.0. Module 1 is really about some theory. I'm not getting into very hands-on resources and everything else. There's still a couple of more lessons left for Module 1. And the next lesson is going to be actually the most important one, I feel, in Module 1, where we're going to talk about Azure Resource Manager or ARM, which is what the new curriculum is filled with. Everything Microsoft is going towards that way, using the ARM model rather than the classic resources and doing that. So let's keep this video nice and short. As usual, the training site is at cloudranger.net. You are viewing this on YouTube already. The slides will be posted at slideshare.net. That's my Twitter handle. All the commands as well as the important links will be posted in GitHub. Don't forget to go visit that. And you can follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you guys for viewing, and please like the videos if you actually like it. And do subscribe to the channel so you can be updated whenever I have a new lesson out there. Thank you guys. I'll see you in the next lesson.